Are you suffering from a toxic relationship? Is the toxicity wearing you down and keeping you from going after your passion and purpose in life? Welcome to Fearless Heart. Get your power back. Learn to let go and let God. Thank you for joining Fearless Heart Podcast. And now, here's your host, actress, author, entrepreneur, Nadia Sahari.
Today, we have a fabulous guest, and we're starting season 1 with episodes about narcissism. Every season, we'll have a different personality disorder or anything that affects our relationships. We need to fix relationships. We need to find out why we have the type of relationships that we have, why they end up bad or why they stay good. So today, my guest is a multiple #1 international best-selling author. She is a motivational speaker, a business empowerment and relationship coach. And I'm going to introduce you to my friend, Gina Gardner. Welcome to Fearless Heart.
Thank you very much. What an introduction.
Oh, you're so wonderful. I am so happy to have you. And I want to really do this so great so that it helps women and men all over the world, because the things that we're going to discuss are going to help many, but they have to make the choices. All we are doing is giving them the information, the education, and inspiration, and they have to go out there, make up their own minds, and do what they have to do to change their lives. So Gina, let's start with, what are the issues that many of us have in relationships?
There are a whole range of problems that people have with relationships. And I think that, over the years, I've seen lots of clients. At the heart of most problems in relationships, there are a few core things. One is the relationship that people have with themselves. If they don't have a good sense of self-worth, if they believe that the only way they're complete is if somebody else completes them, then they're likely to have to put up with what other people give them. So having a great sense of confidence and self-worth makes a huge difference. It's interesting how many bullies, how many people who want to control, who want to take a relationship into something which is unhealthy, have an innate understanding of those who are vulnerable.
Yes.
They don't try it on with people who've got self-confidence. Because if they did try it on, those people would say, hang on a minute, you don't treat me like that. I don't deserve this. But if people lack that self-confidence and don't have a great relationship with themselves, they start to believe that's what they deserve.
Yes.
They start to believe they don't have options. They start to believe, well, I've got to stay because how would I manage on my own? I've been told I'm useless and worthless so many times. I don't believe I could manage on my own. And that's just rubbish. One of the other real big problems in relationships, I think, is that people don't talk about what their core values are, or if they do it at a very surface level. So people will then, when they get together, suddenly discover that one person has a very high, a value which has very high importance, such as fidelity, for example. But the other person doesn't have that same value. Or another person believes that love is about being kind. And I'm amazed at how many relationships where there's actually so much unkindness goes on. But if you knew what your values were, and you talked about not just the values, but the behavior that you need to experience from other people in order to know that that value is being met, then there are lots of relationships which would not last. They would stop long before they've become something serious. I think another strand is people believe that they're communicating, but we have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yes.
And in many relationships, what is happening is that both people are talking and nobody's actually listening.
Yes, yes. Or you have one person saying, stop, stop. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. And they step away and they leave. And they don't give you the chance to express or communicate what you wanted to say.
It takes two to communicate.
Yes, it does.
Another problem, and we're just talking about, we'd like to talk about solutions, but another problem is that when you have people who believe that they have to be seen to be right. And I'd say that being seen to be right is highly overrated.
Yes.
And that then you have an issue where people are so concerned about being right that they destroy any chance of communication where you're going to find not your solution or their solution, but a shared solution. Another problem is that people believe that they're victims. I hear very often, he made me angry, or he made me sad, or she made me frustrated. And I think for me, one of the issues is that we have to take radical responsibility for everything we think. 95% of our thinking is habitual, so we fall into the trap of habitual patterns of behavior. Yes, that we need to take responsibility for everything that we say, but we also need to take a radical responsibility for our emotional state. No one can make you happy unless you choose to let them. But correspondingly, nobody can make you unhappy unless you give them tacit permission to do that. So if you give other people the responsibility of your emotional well-being, you have to put up with what they give you.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. And you're so right about the patterns. I learned that lately through watching Dr. Joe Dispenza on YouTube. I never heard of this in my life until a few months ago, that my brain is living the pattern that I've had for years and years from the age of 5, and it has continued in my life today. I have not been living my life. I've been living my patterns.
And most of the population.
Yes, and that's what we're doing. I never knew that. I mean, I have been through a lot of life. I've had a lot of parts that were wonderful and a lot of parts that were terrible. But I'll tell you, I just learned that 6 months ago.
It's a very valuable piece of information. I often see people who've had one toxic relationship after another. And when I start talking to that client, they will often say, it's all about the other person's fault. And I'd say to anyone listening, you are the common denominator that you take into your life from the moment you're born until the moment you die. If you consistently find that you're falling out with people or that people treat you badly, if it happens once, then okay. But if it's a repeating pattern, then you have to look to yourself first. And I would say that the advice I would give you, everybody here, you cannot change other people.
You cannot.
The only person that you have the capacity to change is yourself. Now, interestingly, if you change the way in which you operate, it has the potential of changing the way other people behave. So let me give you a couple of examples. Working with a couple, angry man, things that have gone on in his life. He spends his life being angry, and he assumes that everything that people offer him is a slight to him, that they're putting him down. He's married to a lady who is very, very together and controlled, and she's very, very good at the put down stare and the using a tone of voice that has an edge to it. So when they first came, her view was, he's always angry. He's always behaving in a way that I find really challenging. I don't like conflict, and it's all his fault. But when we started to look at it, what she was doing, she was going into her habitual pattern of behavior where she wanted to control everything because that felt safe to her because of her upbringing, where she would use, I can only describe it as a teacher who's very cross voice with that real edge to it. And what happens is that each of them was feeding the negative pattern of the other. So she would use her disapproving teacher voice. He would assume motive and go into his petulant, angry child behavior, which would make her more disapproving teacher voice. And so these two were at loggerheads. Understanding their patterns, awareness, first stage. So to start with, I worked with them on an initial meeting with both. But then I realized, and this is very often the case, that each of them had their baggage which needed to be dealt with. And so we've worked separately, helping them recognize, first of all, their own patterns, why those happen, and to deal with them. Your past does not have to define your present and your future. You have a choice. You can leave it in the past, learn from it, and move forward. Or it can be like a great big sack of potatoes that you're dragging with you into every situation in your life. And then, having done that, I brought them back together again. And we are just at the moment exploring what are their values and how can they demonstrate those in a really positive and constructive way. But they're already seeing a significant difference because they are very much more aware. And their awareness has to start with them.
You know, that is beautiful. And do you want to know, that could be me and my partner. It's precisely him and me. Unbelievable. I feel like you were just telling my story.
Do you know, the interesting thing is, that even if you've got a good relationship, you can make it even better by using some of these principles and strategies.
Yes.
You know, if I may, I'd like to share another example of a couple.
But before you do, I wish I had known you a year ago, because I think things could have been resolved and been better in this relationship that I had. But I did not know, and he did not know these things about the patterns that we bring from the past. And we both had baggage, and we both had the past, and we both had guilt. And so there was a lot of stuff. But I understand what you're saying, and I'm so glad that you're helping someone go through this counseling with you, this therapy, and hopefully their lives are going to change. And I'm excited to find out the results of it.
If you posted in
Yes,
future,
you will. We're going to keep this going on the podcast.
But what I would say to you is that why this is going to work is that both partners are fully committed.
Yes.
Making it work.
That's right. And that has to be number one.
And the thing is that with all of these, you have to take charge of yourself. And there will be times that if you're in a relationship where the other person's not prepared to engage with you, then it's very difficult. However, you can still use the principle if you change your behaviors and you break that cycle of habitual behavior, that can work too. And these principles are true for personal relationships and your professional relationships, whether you're talking about your intimate, loving partner, whether you're talking about your relationship with your parents or your siblings or your friends, or whether you're talking about the relationship with your boss or your colleagues or your clients.
That's right. That's right. I would like to ask you a question based on what you're doing with this couple.
Yeah.
If one of them, and I don't know if any of them are, but let's say, hypothetically, one of them might be a narcissist. If that's the case, is there hope for that couple?
It's really, really difficult to generalize.
Okay.
If somebody comes to me and one partner is entrenched in their way of being and sees it only as the other person's fault, part of my role is to try and work with them to get them to have a different perspective on life.
Okay, because I've been reading a lot about narcissists, and I have found that it's very difficult to have a narcissist acknowledge that he's a narcissist or to change, because they're going to blame you for everything.
If you imagine there is a continuum, and the continuum is people from the one end of the continuum is people who are very open and loving and very considerate of other people.
Yes.
Right at the very other end of the extreme is a narcissist. And in my experience, people who are true narcissists, they're quite rare. But while there are lots of people who have narcissistic tendencies, who are self-centered, who need to be right. And in my experience, if they're not completely narcissistic, that you can help them. But ultimately, they have to take responsibility.
Yes.
If they're not prepared to, even with help, then the other person who is on the receiving end has a choice. And their choice is, do you want to put up with this? Are you worth more than that? Are you going to stay? There are occasions, I think, when it is the right decision to stay. And the thing for me that is the measure.
And then there's the time you have to walk away.
If the point comes where this is not about compromise, but about compromising your values,
yes,
and that you are having to compromise who you are and having to do that on a regular basis, that's the time to think, should I be walking away?
That's the decision that I made, and that's why I had to call it quits. He had to walk away because I had to ask him to walk away because I could see no way that he was going to acknowledge and take responsibility and do what was right. And I waited a lot of years for that, and it never happened. So I had to respect myself, my values, and my worth.
That compromise is one thing, but when you compromise your values, that's going to lead to problems.
Yes.
Because if you're doing that consistently, then it's going to lead to a sense of dis-ease and ultimately disease.
Yes, amen. We're going to take a short break, and we will be right back. So don't go away, Gina.
I won't. Thank you.
And we're back with Gina Gardner, relationship coach, and she is marvelous. Have you ever heard such great advice in your life? This is so wonderful. I am so excited. She has another example. Gina, what is that other example that you have?
A lot of people experience difficulties when they retire. While they've been working, they've spent most of their daylight hours, at least, away from one another. And then when they've got together in the evening, by the time they've done, the general stuff, it's bedtime. So they have a limited time together. But when people retire, they're often thrown together at a time when people, particularly if they're of high status within their work, they lose their identity. And so the couple that I want to share with you is the guy had retired, the wife was still working, and he didn't know who he was. And the relationship, which up until that time had rubbed along and they'd had their moments, but had been okay, suddenly took a nosedive. And it took a nosedive for a number of reasons. One, because they were together much more because her job was part-time and he'd work long hours. Partly because he didn't know who he was anymore. If he wasn't being the CEO of his company and he was just him, he had to then wrestle with his own sense of self.
Yes.
The fact that she was working and he was retired, I've got all of this time and I want you to come and play with me. She was younger. She wanted to continue doing her job that she enjoyed. And what they found was, and one of the reasons they came to me, is that actually they were being snippy and unkind to one another, and that there was a real lack of affection. And what they were doing is that they were bartering sex as, if you do what I want, then I'll let you have sex. There was very little affection and very little real sense of kindness and compassion. And it was because one of them was hurting and the other was cross and frustrated. And so unpicking what was going on took us a little while. Once we were able to recognize what was underpinning this, then you can do something about it. So it was in part getting the guy to recognize that actually you have value as a human being, whatever your role. But we do tend to measure ourselves by our work title, by our bank balance, by the size of our house, by the car we drive. I call those junk values.
Yes.
Actually, when you go to the pearly gates as you die, the judgment isn't going to be about those things. It's going to be, what sort of person are you?
Yes.
You're kind and compassionate. And actually, once he started to gain that sense of self-worth and recognize that he had value, even though he wasn't his job, he started to relax. The second thing for him was to realize that because he was now free, he couldn't suddenly expect everybody to drop everything in order to service his needs. And so we started working on things that he could do independently, and that he would enjoy, and creating a structure to his life that gave it some meaning. At the same time, talking to her and helping her recognize that he was going through a bit of a crisis. And actually, if she was a bit more patient with him, and that she was a little more understanding at this huge shift that he was going through, that actually that would help. And we did that through creating a language of affection. No sex, but affection, being kind, being compassionate, saying nice things, touching one another in an affectionate way that didn't require any response at all. Learning about unconditional love, where you're not expecting something in return. The result was that their relationship was better than it had ever been at any time in their marriage.
That's wonderful. Wow, you're amazing. I just love you so much. And I'm so thrilled that you are on my first podcast, my launch. It's wonderful. I can't wait to get started and get into all these subjects, all these topics, because we need them. People don't read anymore, so hopefully they'll listen and they will hear it and they will improve their relationships. Either stay in it or leave it. And this is a choice that they're going to have to make on their own. We're just giving the information. You are amazing. Okay, Gina, we have a listener who has a question for you. And the question is narcissism self-love?
It's an interesting question. Self-love is definitely not narcissism. Self-love, I would suggest to you, is when people appreciate themselves for the genuine, amazing, creative person that they are.
Yes.
They do not see themselves as the center of the universe. Now, there is a continuum where they focus on other people in their entirety, to people at the other end who are not complete narcissists, where the only thing that is important is them. But there are many people who have narcissistic tendencies, which means that they tend to favor themselves rather than other people. But actually, it's quite a destructive sort of way of being. People who love themselves and do that in a genuine and healthy way really appreciate who they are, but they recognize that they have areas for development and they do something about them. People who engage in genuine self-love actually recognize that by stepping into their own power, that they recognize the potential in other people and they nurture that and they want to do that. People who are narcissistic have no concept of anybody else's needs but their own. So it's very, very different.
You're so right. You're so right. You're right to the point on that, because, and the narcissist is very attracted to an empathetic person who has love, because that's what they draw the energy from. They want that for themselves, but they take it from the other person, which leaves the other person drained. But
the trouble is, you see, that they don't just go somebody who's empathetic, but they go to somebody who is vulnerable and empathetic.
Yes.
And I would suggest to you that probably the thing that makes the difference is the vulnerability.
Yes.
Because if you are empathetic, but you love yourself, and somebody behaves in a way that is narcissistic and selfish and unkind, even if you're an empath, you will turn around to that person and say, hold on, no, I'm not going to accept that behavior. And they will move away from that person. But if they are vulnerable and an empath, and because very often narcissists are clever, and in the first instance, they come across as being loving. They come across as focusing their attention on that person. But it's done in such a way that it's not about true love. It's about, I want to get what I want. And the difficulty with that is if you are vulnerable and you are hungry for love and somebody pays you some attention, then almost like a starving person, you will believe what's said in a way that you wouldn't necessarily do quite so much or at all if you loved who you were, if you had confidence and self-worth. But the interesting thing in my experience is that narcissists will very quickly identify those people who do truly love themselves in a constructive way, and they won't go near because they know they're going to get nowhere. But a combination of empathetic and vulnerable.
Very interesting. I can relate to a lot of what you just said. I am an empath, and unfortunately, I was also a vulnerable empath.
Yes.
But I also learned early enough.
And I think that for many people who are the victims of being with people who either have narcissistic tendencies, and that's difficult to be with, but those people have redeeming features, they have redeeming attributes, and often women will put up with those and be prepared to put up with. And there are women who are narcissists. I don't want about men. People who are narcissists,
yes,
their partners, if they have narcissistic tendencies, but they have other tendencies that person loves, they are likely to put up with it. But if you put together somebody who is vulnerable, that narcissist gets their claws into them, they will then start to tell them that nobody else will love them, that they are unlovable, that they don't know what they're doing, and they'll believe it. And so their confidence wanes and their capacity to move away from the relationship becomes diminished. And it takes a lot of strength or finding someone to help you that will help you move away.
I was the former. I had hope. I always thought things could change, things would get better, and that the narcissist would bond and would love and see the light. But there's no light to be seen. They stay in the darkness, and therefore that's when the empath has to make a decision and change their lives. Change your mind, change your life, and do something differently. Stay away from the narcissist and don't get involved any longer, because it will drain you and it will kill you. And you just have to be strong and end it and walk away.
Yeah. I think ultimately, if you truly love yourself, appreciate who you are, you recognize that somebody who treats you in that very negative way is somebody that you need to walk away from.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And like you said, it's women and men that are narcissists. Some are just to the extreme. Some have a touch, some have too much, and some are just completely that way, and there's just no way it's going to change. And you learn that the hard way, unfortunately.
I just suggest that the greatest investments that you can make is the investment in yourself.
That's right.
I think the most important thing for me in life are relationships.
Yes.
Ultimately, when you are on your deathbed, what will your legacy be? And I don't mean your legacy in terms of money, although we all need money, and I'm not in any way crying that. But what will your legacy be? Who are the people you've been kind to? Who are the people whose hearts you've touched?
Yes.
Who are the people that matter to you and you matter to them? That, for me, is the richness of life.
And when you're gone, people are only going to remember the bad things that you did.
Well, it depends on the person.
Well, hopefully they'll remember if you're a good person and you did good things, that's what they're going to remember.
Do you know, my brother, who's my younger brother, suddenly died aged 49. He just dropped dead. He was an amazing guy. I mean, very irritating, as most young brothers are at times, but I loved him to bits. And one of the most amazing things was his funeral, when people kept on coming up and said, you won't know this about him, but he had done a kindness, or he had been thoughtful, or he'd gone out of his way to listen to someone.
Yes.
And he had touched so many people. There were over 300 people at his funeral. He is a guy who left a legacy.
That's wonderful.
And I would say to everybody that's listening to this, whatever your circumstances, whatever your relationships, recognize that you have the power to make a difference. Whatever you want to do, you have the power. And ultimately, it's up to you to step into that. And if you're stepping into your genuine power, you're not in any way diminishing anybody else. If you step into your genuine power, what you do is you recognize other people's potential.
Yes.
And you nurture it.
Wonderful.
And in
I agree.
that, you expand your horizons and the possibilities for yourself too.
And when you're on your deathbed, you're going to think about your soul. Where is it going? And you have to prepare yourself and call on God to save you. If you haven't done it while you were walking around and running around, you have to do it on your deathbed.
I'd say don't wait. Live every day as if it's going to be your last, and then you'll have no regrets.
That's right. So let's tell the audience how they can contact you, your website, and your social media.
So I've got two websites. One is genuinely, and then a little hyphen, and then the word you. So genuinely-u.com. That's my big general site. There's loads of free resources on there. They can also find out how to have one-on-one coaching with me, and all of the programs that I offer. There's a free TV series. All my books are there. So that's genuinely-u.com. If you're interested in leadership, then it's enlightenedleadership.co. Now, you can contact me via email. That's Gina, Gina, at genuinely-u.com. Be very pleased to hear from people. But go and find Genuinely You with Gina Gardner on Facebook. There's a group that you can join, or I'm on LinkedIn as Gina Gardner or Gina Gardner Associates. But whether it's the Relationship Bridge, the Thrive Together Tribe, and that's a group of like-minded people, twice monthly interactive coaching sessions, and a whole program of personal and spiritual development, or the leadership program, I will offer you 20% reduction.
You're incredible. Thank you so much. I can't wait. You're going to co-host with me at times. It's going to be a great show. And thank you so much for giving us a general overview of what this is going to be all about. God bless you, and thank you.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And to everybody out there, just take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you, friends, for joining Fearless Heart. And remember, we all have power, passion, and purpose. We are not here just to work and spend money and buy things. We are here to help each other, to be loving to each other, and do all the things that we expect from each other. If I give you love, I expect you to love me back. We all want what we give. And to give love, you have to love yourself. And to love yourself, you have to love God. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-5. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. That's from the Bible. That's from God. And that's what he tells us. And isn't it beautiful? Just remember this verse. Say it to yourself. Send it to your friends. And say it to your friend. God bless you. I love you. And did I tell you that this is Fearless Heart? Power, passion, purpose. That's you. Change your mind. Change your life.
Thank you for tuning in to Fearless Heart with Nadia and her guests. Be sure to download the Nadia Sahari app at the App Store. For more info, episodes, and connections, go to our website, thenadiasaharishow.com. Share episodes with your family and friends. Follow the show on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Instagram. Are you ready to step out of the darkness and into the light? Are you ready to choose you? Be fearless. You have the power, the passion, and the purpose. Change your mind. Change your life. Fearless Heart. It's all about you. Relationship coach Gina Gardner is a best-selling author, motivational speaker, empowerment and relationship coach. If you are a businesswoman who's overwhelmed or suffering from imposter syndrome and tired of going through one disastrous relationship after another, and you can't say no, and you've suffered from childhood abuse, it's time to take care of you. You can get the best out of your life. Email Gina Gardner now at gina@genuinely-u.com. Her website is www.genuinely-u.com. Mention Fearless Heart with Nadia Sahari, and the first 10 people to sign up will receive a 25% discount. Contact Gina Gardner now